Hi, I'm Doug Taylor, the CEO of the Smith family, and as part of our conversation series, we thought today that we'd talk about early years intervention and the early years summit that's just about upon us. And to help me with that today, I've got Karen Russell, our National Manager for Early Years, who's a great expert in this area, and just to share some insights from our own work at the Smith family and how we think about the importance of this work, and share some insights as it relates particularly to the summit as well, which is coming up, which we're very excited about. 100 other colleagues and families focused on the early years work, thinking about a national early years strategy for the Commonwealth, which is tremendous. So thanks, Karen.
Thank you, Doug.
So a couple of questions for you that I'd love to get your thoughts on. So one, Smith family's been around 100 years, started our work really in the kind of welfare relief space. Why are we in early years work?
Oh, because learning starts in the early years. Yeah. Little children's brains are wired to learn, and the Smith family is all about education. Yeah. So starting with children in those early years and helping them, helping families develop those building blocks for children to engage in productive learning for all of their life. That's who we are. That's our DNA.
Yeah, it's what we're about. I mean, I remember reading a stat that 90% of a person's brain is formed in the first 5 years of their life. So the right time to be in there working with a child and a family, particularly to help them make the most of education. Thanks, Karen. So at Smith Family, we run a range of programs, but in those early years, particularly we're focused on Communities for Children, which is a Commonwealth program, and our own Let's Read and Let's Count initiatives. And they're quite different to a lot of early years activity in that they're community focused and also very much focused in working with families in their homes. Tell us a bit about why do we work in that way in those early years?
Yeah, well, of course, centre-based learning is incredibly important, and there's a very large sector looking after that. But families are the ecosystem for children, and parents are children's first teachers. And so the support that we can offer to parents and carers to help their children learn and grow in the early years, that's a really important support for those families. And of course, what we're doing within the communities, we're in our Communities for Children, for instance, and also in our work in child parent centres and in our Community Hubs Australia work, we're absolutely about supporting parents to support their child's educational journey. And it's equipping those parents to have really good quality interactions with their kids, building on the interactions that they are already having day to day. There's so much strength in that, and there's so much value in, I guess, thinking about the ways that parents can interact with their children to boost that learning. Our mantra with our Let's Count program, for instance, is notice, explore, and talk about. We do so much talking to kids, We have an opportunity to notice the shapes, the numbers, the space, and to talk about what that means for the child in terms of play. And those things happen every day in all kinds of places, and we want to provide support for quality interactions.
That's fantastic, isn't it? That's great, and it also reminds me that we think about, what are the biggest predictors of a child's success in education? It's less about the socioeconomic status of the family, parents and carers, but more about the degree to which the parents and carers are involved in their child's education.
Absolutely.
And connecting, and you've illustrated that
Absolutely.
beautifully. So all this says that the summit's really important, and we're really excited to be participating in it. From our perspective at the Smith family, I think one of the areas that we've been really concerned about is the extent to which families on low incomes and families who experience disadvantage both can access early years programs and the like, but also the way in which they participate. And we've done some research on that. Tell us a bit about those kind of key insights and why we think they're important going forward.
Yeah, in Australia, we are so fortunate to have a lot of access to early childhood education, but that access is not felt equally across the country. And for families living in circumstances of disadvantage who may be experiencing quite a bit of chaos in their lives, navigating the system is a real challenge. And sometimes their first engagement with the early childhood education system isn't positive, and that can send those families away for good. It's really important that we get those settings right. It's really important that we help families reach into the early childhood education system and get what they need, because early bad experiences can really cruel the entire journey for that family and undermine the child's opportunity to interact in the early childhood education space. And that can have really dire consequences for their education journey throughout their lives.
No, that makes a lot of sense, sadly. And obviously for a lot of families, there's both kind of financial barriers, which the government's been trying to deal with over some time with subsidies and the like, but also those non-financial barriers, which you've talked about. But equally is this just fundamental access issues in terms of centre-based activity, not being in the proximity of particularly low-income communities that experience disadvantage, and that's often a barrier as well.
Yeah, that's right. There's been quite a bit of research released recently around what's being called childcare deserts. But even when there are lots of childcare services around, there are questions around whether there's a waiting list. There's also questions around quality and whether families living with disadvantage are getting access to the best quality service that they can. So some big issues to grapple with, which is why the summit's really, really important. And just finally, Karen, if we think about the kind of early years system and all the different dimensions to that, the kind of obviously the children, the families, the providers, all the different players who are really, really important, particularly the children right at the centre of that, we hope. What kind of things do you think we need to do, and particularly think about the role of government as it relates to how would we evaluate the efficacy of a system like that, and then the use of data? What kind of insights have you got on that? Yeah, that's a huge question.
It is a big one, big final one.
Yes. Governments across Australia, the Commonwealth and the state governments are spending billions of dollars on early childhood. And yet we don't have a common evaluation framework that has been agreed across the country. And it really does beg the question about whether those billions are being spent in the right way. There is an open question, I think, about whether we need more money in the system. And I think there are plenty of voices saying that we do. But I think there's equally a question about whether the money that's in the system now is being directed to greatest effect. And the data isn't currently available to show us the way there. And this is a shared responsibility between the Commonwealth Government and the state governments and indeed, I guess, the broader population and our willingness to engage with data.
Yeah, absolutely. And all those things are really important for evidence and evidence-based decisions.
Absolutely.
And so, look, thank you for those insights, Karen. That's terrific. And I mean, all of that's great kind of input. And there's some of the things that we'll be talking about at the summit, which is a tremendous opportunity for our nation and great leadership on behalf of the government as well, to bring people together to think about the best way forward for early years and for children in the Australian community. So thanks so much, and we're looking forward to this conversation continuing.